Hey Deep Chatters, I'm Leah Morris here with my co-host Jennifer Butler, and this is Deep Chats Podcast, where we have raw discussions about real life. Each week you can expect unfiltered, no BS conversations from the heart about topics that actually might matter to you. We're just a couple of relationship coaches who want to cut through the small talk and dive deeper. So thanks for joining us on this journey, and be sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode.
Hey, Deep Chatters. How is everybody doing today? We are so excited to be here with you, and we have an awesome guest today. Her name is Ashley-Nicole Russell, and she is a collaborative law attorney in Greenville, North Carolina, A&R Law. And Ashley's awesome because she is dedicated to changing the story, like the narrative around divorce in America, and really creating a story about how you can bring families together and unite families instead of kind of tearing them apart. And what I love about her is that her mission is totally fueled by like her life purpose and her life experience. And so she is here today, and we are super excited to just dig in and have an awesome conversation today. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Deep Chats is an awesome concept, and I've been listening to some of you guys' work, and I think that it's just really beautiful to kind of be vulnerable and then have that space for other people to see that you can make it through and you'll be all right on the other side of vulnerability.
Totally, so true. Vulnerability can be such a scary thing, but I think it's like the gateway to really like the freedom to kind of live your life and you know, kind of get through whatever you're getting through. So yeah.
Yeah, I think turning over the vulnerability rock was a big like change in the perspective of my life personally.
Yeah. So I guess kind of just tell us a little bit more about, you know, like I said, what fascinates me about you is like you've taken your life journey and really have allowed it to propel you into your life mission. And you're like a force and you're on a course to change things, right? So tell us about that.
Yes, I love those adjectives that you use to describe me because I accept all of those, and I would have to agree with you that I definitely have been described as a force before, and I am a very determined person. I think that I'm very intent on my mission to change the culture of divorce in America. So currently, we have a system where it's a broken system where children are being alienated from parents and people are just broken coming out of the system because they're being given a lot of bad advice, and the system makes attorneys a lot of money, and I am a divorce attorney, so I have a great perspective of the inside of all of that. And I'm a child of divorce, so I'm a divorce attorney, I'm divorced, I'm a child of divorce, and now I'm recently engaged, which we'll get. Yay!
Congrats.
And, you know, I'm pumped that I have space to be excited about that because I do live in a world that may be a jaded place for a lot of people. And I think most people would assume that I would be a jaded person out of it. And I think for a while I was the very broken person from my parents' divorce. And because of that, I've really dedicated my life to changing divorce in America and in the country because I just want to make it a better place. I feel like it's my responsibility that I know that the system is broken, both from the outside as a child, being subjected to it, from the inside as an attorney, from the inside as a participant, and then from the outside as an observer of this culture, where I've gotten to know all of these generations of children of divorce that are now adults, and all of these generations of people who are divorced, and what's happened and the similarities between all of those people. And I call it a lost class of people because they live and breathe all around you. They work with you. They have very similar ways that they handle conflict and address conflict. I specifically, if I want to talk about myself, I'm a child of divorce. And it's not necessarily a great way that they handle conflict or that I handled conflict out of watching my parents divorce and how horrible it was and how divisive it was. And now, you know, I have to have a lot of boundaries in my life with the people that I allow in and that type of toxicity that I allow to be around me. And I wrote the book, The Cure for Divorce Culture, and it's about my life. You know, it's about what it was like to be a child of divorce from a perspective of someone who can speak like me now and say, hey, let me put this into terms for you parents so that you can understand, or let me put this into terms for you people who are also adult children of divorce, and are your broken relationships evidence of what you went through as a child? Probably. And that perspective, now that you can just know that, what can you do to heal yourself, that growth that you're going to put into yourself? Because you can't know that you need to fix it until you understand kind of what it is. And I think it took my career and it took the loss of my first marriage for me to understand how broken I was and how much work I need to do on myself. And I spent a year, that full year. So in North Carolina, you have to be separated for a year before you can get divorced. This is the South. So we have a little stringent criteria here. And so because of that, I had to put a lot of work into myself that year, a lot of man in the mirror moments. I love that Michael Jackson song because I think that it's so appropriate. Like I was just blaming the whole world around me, right? And just mad at the world for some feeling that I had been incredibly slighted. Though I was still going through life, you know, like I was using that to fuel my fire in education. And so I kept, my parents, whenever they got divorced, they really kind of focused on their own lives because they were rebuilding. And I was in a lot of ways forgotten about. And so I went about kind of raising myself. So I really dedicated to school because I had to go to school. I didn't really have sports because nobody was really there to be consistently taking me to sports or throwing the ball with me, or, you know, I was really kind of in the woods building my own worlds by myself. And so I really latched onto education. So I got through life. I was getting through life because I was really leaning on education, and I went to law school. And whenever I became a mediator in district court first. And so I started with alternative dispute resolution processes, and I was in college, but I was a salaried employee at the courthouse. And I remember walking from the courthouse to school at App State in the mountains. And I decided to go to law school because I really felt connected to alternative dispute resolution. It was a different way to handle conflict. You know, like my parents were still fighting. They still hated each other. Every graduation was like absolute torture. Oh my gosh. And when I was 9, and in fact that changed. Like they told me my whole life that I was 7, but I was actually 9. Like they didn't even know how old I was. I was like,
oh my goodness,
people, like so yeah, awareness, right? So because I focused on education, I had like 3 different graduations, right? So of course it was like 3 opportunities for them to just destroy my life to the extent that they could. Like my engagement party was a disaster. And you know, how do you build from there? It's just very difficult when that's all you've been modeled, is that anytime something great's happening, you're just devolving. You know, you can't even handle being around each other, and you're still carrying that forward. And I just kept looking at them like, when are we going to let this go? Like, when is anybody going to think about someone other than themselves here? You know, and it didn't matter how smart I was or how many times I was on the dean's list, or, I mean, I was the salutatorian in high school. I magna cum laude in Appalachian State. I got 2 degrees there. I went on to law school. I was magna cum laude there. And I also graduated with the Dispute Resolution Institute certification. And it was like never enough, because it wasn't about them, you know, like I kept wanting to make them happy and be somehow accepted by them, or all of a sudden important again. But they were too stuck. In the year they divorced. And I was only a reminder of that somehow, you know, like somehow, because I became a dollar sign of child support and, you know, a maneuvering factor of where I needed to go so that money could be alleviated or not, or whatever. All of a sudden now, you know, that was my identity. And then I had to kind of reclaim my identity. And I remembered being this little girl who would like go up to strangers who were eating by themselves, like old people who were eating by themselves whose like spouse had died, and eating dinner with them. And I was
Oh.
just such a sweet little child, you know? But I shelled all that up because I had to like kind of raise myself and get myself through it. And so I got rid of her, just got rid of her. Like she just disappeared. And I became a machine at school and work and business until I got divorced.
Wow.
And then it's like, okay, I'm either going to let this continue to cycle and I'm going to be a part of the problem, or I'm going to say, I know exactly what's happened because I was taught this system in law school and I know how broken it is, and I can identify where those things affected my childhood, where it was stolen from me. And I'm not going to let this happen to all the other children in America. I'm done with this. And I don't care if I need to face down the family court system. I'm okay with that because it's wrong. And if it's wrong, you don't just accept it. You do something about it. And doing that and giving myself that purpose changed my life, because then I wasn't just waking up and going to bed for Ashley-Nicole. Like I was waking up and going to bed to change America. And that makes it a little bit different. And that perspective is so far up, you know, looking down at the chessboard instead of holding on to the rook, which is what I was doing, is how I started to kind of put my life back together and become who I was again and be this person who can cry with you on this podcast, even though I am a big bad attorney, because I can be vulnerable and I can be that little girl again. And I can understand that humanity is in the moment that you let people see what your soul looks like. You know, that's where we really are as humans. And I want other people to be able to do that. I want my clients to be able to do that. And I definitely want the children of divorce for generations to come to be able to do that. So I guess that's a little bit tip of the iceberg.
So powerful. And you're saying so many things that I know resonate with me, and I'm sure with Leah and everyone listening. It's interesting because my parents didn't get divorced, but they should have. Like I was the child who went to bed every night crying, praying to God, please let them divorce, because there was so much conflict. And even though they weren't divorced, as a child, I was in the middle and listening to the constant conflict and all of that. And my response to it was very similar to yours, was really to try to do whatever I could do to fix it and make it better. And if I was just, you know, really good at school or pretty enough or this enough or that enough,
Perfect enough.
Yeah, just be perfect. And then everything else will be perfect around me. And then, yeah, like just boxing away the little girl who I really was. And I am sure that resonates with so many children who have gone through what I call World War III. I used to think I lived in the middle of a world war in my home.
100%. And it's so amazing that through all those generations, and I mean, you know, we can't stand here and throw stones and be like, why did you not know? But I mean, kind of, we can. But I want to give a little bit of grace in that it takes a couple of generations of something being wrong before we can see the pattern, so we can fix it. So were we all sacrificial lambs? Maybe, you know, like now we see conflict is very intrusive, and if it's in the home and between parents, children suffer greatly. And so now it's like, you know, now like the message needs to get out. I want that to be, you know, I want that to be different for so many people, because it is so hurtful. I mean, just the level of every aspect of my life that has affected, you know?
Yeah,
Absolutely. I think too, like, I love that you are in ownership of the injustice of what happened to you, because for me, that took a while because I always, you know, being a child of divorce and being the one who was always trying to like connect dots and keep things, you know, at least semi-sane looking, and everybody like a little bit happy at the expense of my own happiness. It was really hard for me to come to this place of like, actually what happened wasn't fair for me, and that was wrong, and I'm angry. And because you don't want to be the burden, you don't want to be the one who people are looking at, because you're not trained as a child of divorce typically to be the center of that emotional support. Like, right, you are the one supporting the
Everyone,
parents,
yes.
and the siblings, or whoever else needs it. And finally coming to a place of all of us really claiming, like, you know, you said we can't really sit here and cast blame, but we kind of can. Like, hell yeah, we can. Like, yeah. And like, that's the only way that I think people are ever gonna come to places of like, oh, let's try collaborative divorce. Let's try to think of a different way to organize this process so that there's not, you know, victims lying on the side of the road who are unattended to. You know, I think that it's very powerful to own when things did not go well, even though it looks like a finger pointing. It's like, actually, this is also helping the future generations to not have to find themselves in a divorce themselves, to realize that, you know, how things could have gone a little bit different.
And just to like put in perspective, you know, I now don't actually speak with my parents. I think they're both great people. I think that they're good in their space, and that you know, they deserve all the respect in the world, but they have to have major boundaries in my life, because I can't get engaged and get married and have children with them present. I just can't. Like, I've tried my entire life to help them. I've tried my entire life to have peace with them in my life, and they not, because I don't know that they specifically are trying to hurt me. It seems that way, but they're just still so stuck. And until they get unstuck, which I don't know is possible at this point. I mean, you know, we've really tried, but it's a little bit too personal for me. I'm an expert in this, but when it's my own family, you know, they only respect my expertness to a certain level, you know. Other than that, they still think that I'm wrong. And so so it's a little difficult, but I have tried. I put in the work, and you know, even on my engagement post, my mom was like commenting crazy stuff and had to be like removed. And if something happens on your podcast post here, then it may be her. But just, can you imagine to even be a mother and for your child to be so successful and doing such a great thing, and to be so self-hating, self-absorbed, just stuck, to be able to go to a place that you could be that aggressive for everyone to see towards your own daughter.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's just like, for those people, you just have to send them positive energy, pray for them, and accept that you can have your own boundaries, and that you can change your own space, and that you can be okay. And that's what I had to do. And now I breathe pretty great.
Yeah. And I think like I don't know your family history, but I feel like this is something that is, you know, as we're talking about, these are like wounds that we're reacting from, that have been passed down from our childhood, and, you know, your mother's childhood and her mother's childhood. And you're sitting here saying like, the buck stops here. Like, as painful as this is to not have her in my life, I can't pass this down to my, you know, descendants. Like, it has to stop.
Yes. And being able to accept, Keith is my fiance, and he's an amazing person. He's just I say he's my grounding rod. He knows exactly who he is. You know, he has an amazing family. His parents have been married forever. You know, they had a great relationship. They modeled that for him. You know, not knocking people whose parents didn't have great relationships. I'm just saying, just be aware that you're not necessarily good at seeing good relationships. That's all, you know?
Yeah.
And, but he is, but in order for me to be able to commit to having children, what I had to know is that I would not carry this on to the next generation. And for me, that means that they can't be around until they're like 12, because by then, you know, they know who they are and they're more stabilized. And I can't let this, if my mission in this world is to change America and change the generations to come, then I damn sure am going to make sure the generation to come in my family is going to get the best fighting chance possible. And for me, that means this, you know, and I miss them every day. You know, which is just,
You know, I just
accept.
hope, yeah, and I hope people can hear that, because I think sometimes people feel like boundaries are this like aggressive act or
Yeah.
something. And I hope that people can hear that boundaries are an act of love, right? Like it's an act of love for yourself, for your relationship, for your children to come, and for your parents. Because as long as we keep showing up available for the toxicity and the
Right.
mistreatment, then we're almost cutting them off from ever having a possibility of outgrowing it, right? And it's like what you're doing is such an act of courage and love, and it's obviously it's not easy for you, but that right there is what it is, to honor yourself and to honor what you're standing for. So
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
And to honor your space and the people that you love. You know, I can't subject Keith to that and his, you know, we have this beautiful moment, you know, right now. I have to protect that, and I have to protect our engagement and our happiness. And if I allow those types of things to come, I mean, she's already, you know, if you focus on that, it's easy. It would be very easy for me to get distracted by that and be like, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't do this, or, you know, maybe I shouldn't continue with my mission. In fact, you know, they didn't want me to publish the book that I published, but I was like, I've sacrificed my whole life for you almost. Like, I'm sorry, but I just can't. Like, this one's mine. Now it's my life, you know? And I think that that's a tough message to hear. It's a tough message, you know, and I really want the clients of today, if you're going through a divorce, listen to me. Listen to what I am saying. There are so many process options that you can choose that is not going to do this to your child or to your own life, you know? And promise that you don't want your children to go pull those records and read what you put in them, the text messages. They're all public record. And children now are so smart and so savvy that they know how to get to the courthouse. And the courthouses are now putting all those records online. I don't think any parent in the system at all actually thinks about the fact that what they're doing in that moment, in that courthouse, on that stand, and what they're saying and what they're accusing their spouse of, that their child's physically going to read that. And they are.
Yeah.
And it's, that perspective is crazy, you know? And then the statistics, which I don't know that we want to get into all that, but they're bad. They're really bad. Substance abuse, alcohol abuse, suicide, school shootings. Children are reacting off of how they're seeing conflict modeled, and it's obviously it's not good.
Yeah, you know, and it really, again, it all kind of boils down to like, what are you going to make this moment in time in your life mean, right? What are you going to choose for it to mean? And I think that a lot of times we get stuck in, well, I want to do this in a better way, but my partner, you know, is crazy or is acting out, or, you know, it only works if both are committed to it. And yes, and right. It can't be, you know, this beautiful collaborative conscious experience if both people aren't participating in it. And you can still show up in a conscious and empowered and really choice driven place where you're being the taking the higher road, and you're making sure that you're in integrity, and you're making sure that you are a living example of what's possible, even in the face of somebody who might not be cooperating with that.
Because that's the model. It only takes one parent to model, and if you don't have any kids, you're modeling it for your own self, you know, like how to handle conflict. And I think that that's such an awesome thing. And I think that, you know, always don't let your perspective get jaded. I could definitely be jaded about marriage. You know, I could really assume that it has a pretty terrible success rate. I mean, honestly, in reality, it's like the worst success rate that any human could actively choose knowingly to walk into. I mean, let's just be honest. And so, but I understand that probably better than most. And I'm not afraid to take this step, because if I'm not going to live in fear in all of this other stuff, then I'm definitely not going to live in fear here, even though your personal life is the scariest place to take risk. You know, it's a little bit easier to take risk with just money in a bank account, even though that's hard, but it's really risky to risk your heart.
Yeah.
And that is something that, you know, I want the message to be across the board. My message is you can have whatever life you want it to be. This is a transition. This was a transition for me. And I wanted to make sure that if I was going to transition and get divorced like my parents did, you know, that in and of itself, I was like very upset with myself. You know, that's a lot of failure there to feel like I needed to embrace of repeating that cycle already. And I had to kind of accept that. And then I had to understand that if I was going to have that type of failure, that I was going to make sure that whatever was produced on the other side of that was going to be so amazing that it made perfect sense why I had some sort of failure.
Totally. I'm like, you are speaking my language, like get out of my head. I felt that exact same way. Like, you know, that was like going through being a child of divorce and a divorce that it was not healthy. And, you know, for 30 plus years, still to this day, I'm still hearing about it. It's still an issue. And it's just like, that was my worst fear, was, you know, that going through that. And on top of that, bringing a child into the world and like creating that for them. So definitely like when I was going through my own divorce, I was like, you know, in the corner, like rocking back and forth, like this needs to make sense somehow. And I think what you and I have done with our lives, you know, we're helping to raise awareness around this. We're helping to heal things. We're helping to, you know, better prepare people for something that inevitably happens to a lot of folks, right? So how can we take our experiences and just like actually like squeeze juice out of it, right? The lemon, like if we're given these lemons. And I think what was I going to say? Oh, I love that you said too, like the jadedness. I think that you know, I feel like that was something that I was even more afraid of, more than divorce, more than having children and splitting that up, was to end up like my mom, to end up that bitter, like jadedness for my entire life and not be able to see past my own tunnel vision of my victimization or whatever I was thinking. And so I feel like, you know, this past year, I decided finally, after my divorce was about 4 years ago, but I finally decided I want to get married again one day. And like, that was the most empowering thing to recognize, was like, I'm not that. I'm not jaded.
Yes.
Such a celebratory like, realization, you know?
And that's so good, because it's like, you didn't throw in the towel. You didn't say, I'm going to be a victim. You rose above. You leveled up, like you said on our podcast that we were just on. And leveling up is so empowering. Like, so many people are so afraid of it. And I'm like, if you just do it once, you'll be like, oh, okay, that feels good. Like, that feels really good to do that. Like, I feel now empowered that I was physically able to get myself out of my own headspace. That's difficult as humans to do. It takes asking questions. It takes engaging your prefrontal cortex and saying, what am I going to do to get out of this? What are my options here? What am I willing to give up to get out of this? You know, that's something that people almost never think about, what they're willing to give up to get out of a scenario. And I think that when you start to ask your brain those questions, it allows you to get out of critter state and to start to think about how you're going to level up. And then the world is your oyster. You know, it's endless opportunity. And it's all within your power, including a successful relationship, as hard as that sounds, because there's another human involved. But at the end of the day, if you control your behavior and you control your reaction, and I'm not saying you're perfect, I'm not perfect. I get out of this and go down into my little critter state a lot, and I have to crawl myself back out, but that's life. You know, that's just life. You're always going to have to do that. And there's never a moment where you've just arrived and now you're just healed. just healed from all the things ever happened in
I'm
my
totally
life.
enlightened.
I made
Yeah.
it. I'm done.
I no longer walk on the ground. I just float, and it's like, nope, that's really not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, it's like what you said too, like, finally coming to a place where now you're engaged and now you're happy and you have this healthy relationship. Like that was also the biggest risk was you're sitting here telling people how to do that and how to transition through these things, but actually like putting yourself into that process and saying like, I'm willing to be vulnerable here again and to try again and to have faith and trust in myself again. Like that's the most scary thing. And I think it's safer to be in that little critter state where we're like, I'm just going to do what I've always done. Right. And so we want to go back there. We want to go back to that blindness, that, that shadowy area, because even though like stepping out of that is the most empowering, it's also the most like, you're kind of like putting your neck out there, like taking that risk. So I'm inspired by you to hear, and I am like staring at your ring, like as you're talking too. I'm like, look at that.
And look,
so
so
beautiful.
he put turquoise in it because it is a very
yeah.
centering stone, and we met literally on the ocean, on the south facing beach, so on like the north and south face. He put he had it made with a jewelry company of people that we know. It's a smaller town in North Carolina, but and it's just really incredible, to have something that means so much and that he put so much effort into, and that is so, like turquoise and good energy and all, I just really embrace all of those those beliefs so much. And for that to be something that I wear, that's something that, would be handed down to generations, makes me feel like I have a good foundation for this. Obviously I know it's going to be a lot of work, relationships are work, I'm going to be disappointed, there are going to be failures, there's going to be conflict. Keith's not going to be amazing all the time. He's going to disappoint me. He's going to leave his clothes and, all the things that guys do. That's going to happen. And I've just got to be like, yeah, I know that's going to happen. Like, I don't expect that he's going to blossom into this perfect person and then make sure that every day all of my emotional needs are met and sexual too. It's like, he's not going to, just become that because we're getting married. He doesn't Disney transform into Prince Charming the day that we say I do. And I think that is a big piece, and it is vulnerable because, this is what I preach. And now I'm about to be like, okay, now you get to watch me do it. Let's see. As I take on the greatest percentage chance of failure that there is in America. And let's add in the fact that, I was going to say, we do have to give ourselves some grace because when we're modeled divorce, it is more likely we will get divorced. Yeah. And, if that happens, not to become a victim because the odds were stacked against us, so if two people's parents are divorced and they get married, their likelihood of divorce is 200% more likely.
Wow.
It's almost impossible to not get divorced.
Wow.
So if you apply that earth-shattering realization, you're like, that was barely me. Just kidding. Don't do that.
Whoa.
But you can give yourself a little grace.
Wow. That's a crazy statistic.
Mm-hmm. So it's 100% more likely if one of you's parents are divorced.
Yeah.
So Keith and I, and a second marriage is already 70%, divorce rate 70%. So if you add that in, like you would never, ever go to Vegas and play that odd. Never.
Yeah.
Not one person would accept that. If you really think about it, marriage is, if we were standing in New York at the stock market and we were analyzing this, not one person would buy it.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Do you think the odds are like that because the generation, like how, like, will those odds change is what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I believe that with the change of the culture. So what happened is, so in the book, there's a graph, and in 69, Reagan signed into effect no-fault divorce in California. And then that spread like a tidal wave over the United States because everything moves from the west to the east. We know that. And so because of that, you know, the filings, so many women, it was off the back of the feminist movement. So women are not property any longer. They can file for themselves. So many women, because before that, you could only get divorced if you were a woman, if your man beat you or he cheated. Those are the only two ways. And so, and that was in most states. I wouldn't say that's over the entire country. Obviously, every state has the ability to make its own laws. And so because of that, though, it created a backlog because so many people filed. So it wasn't actually, it didn't start in a negative way. It didn't. Divorce attorneys realized that that process took 2 to 3 years, and they made their hourly rate for that long, you know?
Right.
And so it became an industry. And then that industry, because this is America, so we're not going to go, you know, like everybody gets to make their own living, but you don't get to make your living off the back of broken children. You definitely don't get to do that in America. So they basically stoked that fire because they want to keep making that money. And now divorce is a $50 billion industry in America, and that is almost all in attorney's fees.
Wow.
So because of that, the divorce rate went like this, and the marriage rate inversely goes the absolute opposite way. Now, if you watch the generations, it is a complete divide. And we are now at the lowest marriage rate of all of recorded history, lower than the Great Depression and both world wars.
Wow. Wow.
This is what we need to be talking about.
Yeah. Well,
all that's in the book.
That's a whole discussion about the way millennials, and it's not even just marriage, they're redefining what relationships look like and what relationships mean and the fluidity of it and all of that.
But why wouldn't they? If you look around you and you see something's broken, you fix it, right? And so if all of these generations of children have been watching their parents utterly fail at this, not because of their own selves necessarily, but because they're a part of a system that is formulating a plan to destroy their family.
Yeah.
That is actually happening, because that is how you protect your client's best interest. We didn't know, though. We didn't have all this empirical data that says children need both parents, and that you can't just take one parent and just throw them out the window and because just the court says so. Children can't reconcile that in their mind. And this is what people were turned into. You know, they're being told by their friends and by their divorce attorney and by this and that and the other to do things that are not in line with their moral character or their sense of self or how they were raised to believe that they should behave. And then you have to kind of deal with that afterwards. It's just sad, but it's getting better. And so day by day, people are understanding that this is a system that is broken. These are not necessarily people that are broken. They're broken people going into a broken system and coming out more broken. Yeah. That's the problem. We need the broken people to not go to the broken system. They need to go to the good system that will help them generate out of that process as a more whole person instead of a more broken person. And then the more we generate out more whole, I can't cure you. I'm not going to just like complete your circle for yourself. You know, you have to spend that time in the mirror. I had to do it. I would say I'm not a broken person anymore. I would say that I have lots of issues that I'm still dealing with. Before I was broken. I'm no longer broken. I'm very functioning at this point, but there are always bad days. And just to be able to understand that if we just keep generating out incredibly broken people, then we're never going to be able to fix the system. But if we can start making them more whole with this divorce coaching, with my process, these people are able to understand it's a system, understand their own environment, understand what they're modeling, understanding what they want to be on the other side, understand it is an opportunity. As soon as we get this message out far and wide, the perspective will change. Yeah. Children commit suicide at a 30% increased rate if their children went through litigated divorce. When parents start to understand that, they'll stop signing the stuff that attorneys are putting in front of them. It'll be natural at that point. That's what I truly believe.
Wow. This is such an incredibly important message. And I am almost at a loss for words because it's like, it's making so much sense.
Doesn't it?
Yes. And we're dealing here or at least I'm dealing here with people in the recovery phase. of these things. And okay, this is how we heal going forward after you've already hit this place of, I can't do this anymore. Something needs to, be different. Something needs to change. I need to heal. But where you're going is like all the way back to the root, to the soil, to the water that, like you're really going to where the initial crack starts. And I think the fact that it's an entire industry makes it an even more difficult mountain to climb, because there's so many people's hands pulling out of the pot, right? So many people's hands like in there saying like, but this is how I get more money, and this is blah, 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 blah.
But I'm a highly efficient person, so I cannot let this take forever of my life. So I dedicated 5 years to this a year and a half ago, and it's going to be done in 5 years. And the way that that's going to happen, one, already 3 states are changing their laws. Kentucky changed their law. So now Kentucky has what's called shared parenting. So when you separate, it is automatically both parents are 50-50. If you want to go to the court because somebody works out of town or doesn't, see the children as much, or works more hours, or his job is not, whatever, then you can make that agreement on your own, or you can go to the court. But it is eliminating the court system. Does that make sense? So that the court is not in the place where it doesn't necessarily need to be anyway, which is the family. All of these things were built by 2 people who didn't need attorneys to buy all of this stuff. And I didn't need to be there for you to physically create your child. We didn't have to sign a contract that was like, okay, we're producing a human now. So before I insert this, let's just make sure that we understand all of the things that we're going to do. No. So if you didn't need all of that to get into it, you don't need all of that to get out of it. You need that if you go to the court system. Most people don't know that they don't have to. And so one of the other people in your relationship may have already gone to the court system. Can you help that to an extent? No. However, you can control your surroundings. But the more that we get this message out, I'm telling you, these generations of children that are coming out, they don't even understand why their parents are engaging in this behavior. They're so far removed from it. They think that they're like, you got yourself into this. Like, why are you even fighting over me? Don't fight over my expenses. Go do your own thing. I'm fine. Like they don't want any part of this anymore. And so I truly believe it is changing. I do think marriage is suffering because of it, and relationships are suffering as this fixes itself. And I think the pendulum's having to swing, but it will swing back. And I think once the system has flushed, which is basically what needs to happen, then at that point, people will come back to the concept and understand that it was a system that then broke, a belief system really of marriage and relationships. So I truly believe that it is fixing. I really believe that it is. And I think people are becoming more and more aware all the time because of stuff like what we're saying, and just understanding that it doesn't have to be so malicious. You don't have to be malicious just because your friend had a bad divorce and your mom had a bad divorce. And the more that people just kind of start to take that step back and they're not as aggressive, then the better it'll get. It's just about awareness. I don't know. I'm putting up billboards as fast as I can. We'll see how far I can get them.
Oh my gosh. I love it. I love that message. I love that you're changing laws and just rewriting the entire narrative.
Oh, and the piece that I did miss is business. Business fixes stuff faster than anything. And I'm having banks shoot commercials for me because they're so tired of the amount of money they're spending on subpoenas, on these records, on having to go to court. Business is over this. The retirement accounts are being drained. Attorneys are writing quadros off of, which is a way to get money out of a retirement account for their own fees before the case even starts.
Wow.
Money out of your retirement account or your husband's retirement account before the case even starts, just to pay their fees, just an entry into the system. Businesses are over this. They're over it. And so now, and before COVID hit, I was speaking to big business. Like my goal is to get in front of Google and get in front of Amazon, and them to start analyzing the rate of people who are getting divorced in their companies and sending those people directly to employment assistance programs that send them to collaborative attorneys or mediation. Then we've removed the entire problem. Yeah. Just like that.
Wow.
So that's the goal. And it's
wow.
going. COVID did kind of throw a little wrinkle in getting in front of the businesses as much, but I do think it's allowing a perspective of the world where people are seeing that this industry also needs a new perspective. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Man, 2020 is all about the awakening and the restructuring of everything, and I am loving it.
It really is an awakening year, is it not?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
It's not working. Time to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. Where can people find your book, Ashley?
So it's on Amazon, The Cure for Divorce Culture. You can find it on my website too at anrlaw.com. And the social handle is ANR Law as well, or my name, if you wanted to follow me directly. Me is more about my personal life, so you'll see lots of wonderful, happy things. And then obviously the firm is more about the mission. And then so Ashley-Nicole Russell is my name. And then other than that, I have Divorce Healthy podcast, which is really incredible. We have lots of guest speakers, and also I go into a lot about my past and how this is changing and tools people can use. And it's really just kind of all in one resource, and it's gauged out by the month. So there's 12 episodes for 12 months. So it's kind of like a topic a month. It's helping to kind of build towards the future, like a step-by-step kind of process.
Awesome.
I love that. You are a force. Damn.
I know.
I always like to
feel
ask,
it all the way from the East Coast.
Yeah. I always like to ask too, right before we get off, what, if you could leave our listeners with like one phrase or one message, like what would you want to impart on them?
I want you to know that I believe in you. 100% you can do it. I've seen everybody in the world, all types of people from all types of places, with all types of family structures, and I've seen them been able to have exactly what they envision, but you have to believe it first. It's the most simple concept on this planet, that you can actually have it, but the first person you have to convince is the person that you look at in the mirror. And as soon as you can do that, you can have anything in this world, and I really believe that you can do it. So do me a favor and stare in the mirror for a long time tonight. It's weird to look at yourself in the mirror for a long time, but just do it and just think and just hear my voice saying that I believe in you.
I love that. I have to say, never have I ever gotten so many goosebumps during a podcast interview, but this whole time was just like, poof. You're so inspiring. Your energy, I can feel your energy all the way across the country, and your tenderness, as you're talking about all this stuff in the midst of that strength is just such a incredible balance to like behold. And I think that a lot of people are going to benefit from hearing this and reading your book. And I just want to say thank you for coming on today.
Yay! Well, you know what? You guys are really peaceful. And, to be able to have a conversation like this and feel like this, and I've got goosebumps too, is you got to have people who can help you feel that way. And you guys are doing a great job with that. So thanks for bringing the positive vibes and for putting the work into. I can tell you guys have put a lot of work in yourselves too. And it's just like, it feels good to be around people who can commit to that level of work, because it's not easy, but it's worth it.
It is. On that note, we're going to sign off. Thanks, Deep Chatters, for listening. Until next time.
To all you Deep Chatters out there, Leah and I want to thank you so much for listening. This is a podcast that's all about connection, so we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on Instagram at Deep Chats Podcast. And if you haven't already, please go to iTunes to rate and review us. Every review helps other Deep Chatters just like you be able to find this podcast.